Okay, so good morning to you. Um, we shall be having bits of various topics today. But first of all, I want to complete this leverage and firm valuation topic. And the last bit that we're left with is the weighted average cost of capital. It's not last, actually, it's second last, but in a way, it leads to the next subtopic, the weighted average cost of capital. And you know that we have the financing resources, which is debt and equity, and we need to compensate those resources or those people or those institutions who provide us those resources. And for this, we calculate the return on equity, the minimum cost that we must pay for the equity, and we also know that how much debt we pay. So calculation of weighted average cost of capital is something very strategic. The companies always try to change their debt equity ratio so that they are going to pay the minimum of weighted average cost of capital. So any capital structure which is minimizing the company's cost of capital, but without, for the same amount of risk, for the same level of risk, is a wise move. That's what the corporate finance managers always look forward to. The formula is very easy. In fact, I would make some calculations soon on Excel, and then I would share that spreadsheet with you. The weighted average cost of capital, you can see that it's equal to the WE, the W subscript, is it subscript? Yeah, the foot, yeah. The WE is the weight of equity, and then R multiply it with R subscript E, which is the return on equity. And then we have the WD, the weight of debt. And of course, we multiply with the cost of debt, that is the interest rate, RD. But in between, if you see, there is a 1 minus TC. And you know that the TC is equal to the marginal tax, the corporate tax rate, which the companies pay effectively. And this is not the reason it's called marginal or effective is that it is not the headline or Googled corporate tax rate. It's very specific to the company. Even though if you Google the corporate tax rate in Finland, it could be some rate, I don't know, you can check. But what is here is the ratio, the percentage of gross profit or the profit before tax, which the particular company is paying in a particular year. So if you notice your companies, I know you have analyzed your case company several times now in the previous tasks, when you calculate levered beta, unlevered beta especially. If you go back, you will find that the corporate tax rate, which your company, your case company is paying, even that is not same in the different years. That can also change from 1 year to another year. So here we take that effective corporate tax rate. And you know that D plus E, basically the debt plus equity is primarily your total market, the total book value of the company or the market value of the company. If the company's trading, then we calculate the market value of equity and debt. Anyways, that's not a very big thing. But the point I'm trying to make here is that where do these numbers come from? The WE is equal to debt of the and the value of the company. Maybe I better do it for you. So let me copy the title, weighted average cost of capital. I'm not sure if I have any spreadsheet like this before. Let me check in my folders. If I have it, then I would rather not recalculate. I think I should calculate. No, it doesn't appear to be in my folder. So let's take an example. Let's take the example. Let's take a spreadsheet. We are very fond of spreadsheets these days. But in a way, it's good because then you can see what is happening. Uh, mm, okay, so let me type it. Weighted average cost of capital. Let me share the screen, by the way. No, it's here, yeah. I hope you can see the spreadsheet. If not, please let me know, yeah, because I want to do the calculations so that you can see it. If you don't see, please let me know. Now, the formula of weighted average cost of capital, if I can copy, is this. Let me see if it sticks there. No, it looks very clumsy actually. Maybe I take a screenshot instead. Yeah, I take a screenshot and then that would be better. So just a sec. If I can find it. If I can snip and yeah. So I copy the formula. No, it doesn't. Just a sec. So I can skip the whole thing here. Snip the new, so I can copy and I can paste it in the, yeah, now it's fine, but it looks even horrible, more horrible rather. But don't worry, I can adjust it. Yeah, so okay, so let's do it. The weighted average cost of capital is equal to the cost of, so let's say that we have the total debt in the company, and let's say it's 2 million, 1, 2, how many zeros are in 2 million? 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the equity is 3 million. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Therefore, you can see here D plus E. You can call it D plus E, or I can call it value of the firm, which is D plus E. D plus E, yeah. And this is the sum of both, sum of debt sum of debt and equity. That's the value of the company. So you can see that the weight of equity and weight of debt, how much is the weight of equity and the weight of debt. So if you want to find the weight of equity, you would be dividing the equity with the total value, which comes to be 60%. And if you divide the weight of debt. This would be by the total value, which means total debt is 40%. I can actually make them 2 decimal places. Numbers, 2 places, maybe. Yeah. So, yeah. And then let's imagine that the finance cost, remember that the debt equity will come from the balance sheet. We know all these things. And then we calculate the finance cost. And let's imagine that the finance cost is 200,000. Basically interest, 200, 1, 2, 3. And if we can find out the profit before tax, so let's call it PBT, is 1 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the taxation, the tax amount, the corporate tax rate, the corporate tax, not rate, but the corporate tax amount is, the company is paying is 40,000. No, 400, it's 1 million. So let's call it 400,000. 4, 1, 2, 3. 400,000, one more zero. It means that the effective or the marginal tax rate which the company is paying is basically the amount of corporate tax divided by the profit before tax, which means that the effective corporate tax rate is also 40%. Okay, and then we need the cost of equity. Let's imagine that cost of equity you already know, and by the way, the cost of equity come from CAPM. Okay, you know how to apply CAPM, and the CAPM would give you the cost of capital. So imagine this comes to be 12%. So I can call it 0.12. The cost of capital is, the cost of equity is 12%, and the cost of debt. Now this is very interesting how to calculate the cost of debt. The cost of debt is equal to the finance cost which you pay divided by the total debt. So for example, I know that the finance cost is 200,000. So if I divide by the amount of debt, which was, I guess, 2 million. So this comes to be 10%. Okay. So the cost of debt is basically 10%. Now, what mistake the students can do is that when they calculate weighted average cost of capital, they know that, hey, this is a simple arithmetic mean. We know that how much is the percentage of equity. We know that how much is the percentage of debt. And we know that what is the cost of equity and what is the cost of debt. Just put them together, multiply them, and we get the value. So now I'm going to calculate the wrongly formulated weighted average cost of capital, WACC. And the wrong one would be the weight of equity times, the weight of equity, where is times? It's here. The weight of equity times the cost of equity plus the weight of debt, which is C11, yeah, which is C11 times the cost of debt, which is C17, and 11.2% is the cost of equity, weighted average cost of capital. This is a wrong formula because if you remember, and in this topic we have discussed many times, and I think in this course we have discussed hundreds of times now, that the debt is tax deducted, because we see that in the income statement that you pay the finance cost before you pay the tax. So basically we have discussed many times that debt is tax deducted. The interest is deducted. That gives us interest shield, and then the interest shield becomes the debt tax shield. So basically, I would say that the cost of debt is not exactly 10%, even though on the face it looks 10%, but basically this is this is deducted. There is some subsidy, and how we do it, you can see in the formula that when you calculate the cost of debt, we multiply it with something else, and that something else is 1 minus corporate tax rate. In other words, there is a subsidy of 40% on debt, and when I multiply this, it comes to be 9.6%. So in other words, there is a, even though visibly the cost of debt is 10%, but you're not paying 10% because you're only paying 60% of 10%, because 40% is the tax, and that tax is a subsidy on debt. So it comes out to be 9.6. So if I can change it to the percentage with 2 decimal points, yeah, so it comes to be 9.6%. So this is the weighted average cost of capital. Okay, so I have not created any task yet for you, but I would be creating a task in your slides and make a new formulated set of slides to you. So this would be your task 9 basically, which would be how to calculate the weighted average cost of capital of a company for multiple years. So all you need is that you must have the amount of debt. Basically, you can take the sum of liabilities if you, that's much easier. So for the practical purposes, you can see the value of the company as the value of liabilities and the value of equity, which is fair, fine. Then the value would be debt plus equity, which is a sum of both. And then you can calculate the share of debt and share of equity in both. The finance cost, you can see the actual number from your finance cost, and the profit before tax is basically your, I can also use the synonyms. It's the earnings before tax. It is the income before tax, or sometimes we can call it even the gross profit. Sometimes, or any other expression. But as long as you understand the idea that it's before tax, it's the result before tax. Yeah, some companies even say result before tax, but there is no end to these phrases. But that's not a problem. The most important thing is that you know what it is, okay? And when you put them together, put all these threads together, then you can calculate the weighted average cost of capital. This is the formulation. And you can see that here, we multiply the weight of, you can see C10, which is the weight of equity, multiply by C16, which is the cost of equity. And the cost of equity come from the CAPM. Okay, so CAPM would give you the estimate that how much is the minimum cost of capital equity which you must give to your investors. And then comes C11. C11 is the weight of debt, which is 40%. And C17 we multiply. C17 is the the debt cost, which we have, and you can calculate by yourself how much is the average cost of debt. But we don't just multiply them together. We take away, because if the tax rate is 40% in this example, then 40% of your interest payments, or 40% of the, is basically tax deducted. So we minus, so only 60%. So if the tax rate is 40%, so you're only paying 60% of the interest rate. In other words, you are paying less. So if your cost of debt, which is the finance cost divided by total debt, is 10, basically you are not paying 10% of debt. You are only paying 60%. You're only paying, let me see, because see, 40% is the tax rate. So basically, you are only paying 1 minus corporate tax rate times the percentage of your debt. So you are only paying 6%, not 10%, even though on the face you are paying 10% rate of interest, but actually you're paying 6% because 40% is, sorry, you're paying not 10%, but you're paying 6%. Why not 10%? If you see 10%, 6%, there is a reduction of 40%, and that 40% of reduction in the interest rate, this is what is in the books. This is what you actually do. And thanks to 40% of marginal tax that you are paying, you are getting 40% subsidy on your debt cost, the interest cost. So you are paying this much, basically. And when you bring this thing here, like I did for 6%, it comes out to be that your weighted average cost of capital is 9.6%. And this you can calculate over many years. And I think it can be a very good thesis topic for somebody, that how the cost of weighted average cost of capital, is it having some relationship with the company's performance, or is it so that the companies are growing, they are getting bigger, and what impact does it has on the weighted average cost of capital? Okay, so this could be a food for thought. But coming back to your so
Alina, turn your mic off.
Maybe the slide display, full screen mode here. No, this is what I wanted actually. All right. So this slide I took from the Brilliant Myers book, and you can see here that it's about how to formulate the idea. Now imagine that there's the two companies, and their operating income is same, $1 each, and the company is paying to the bond holders and the equity holders. So basically, this is the company which is the levered, and this is the one which is unlevered. So the corporate tax paid out of interest is nothing because it's a tax subsidy, and the income after corporate tax is still 1, and then the personal tax is TP. So basically, the TP is the personal income. You know that when you get your income from the company, you also pay tax on your annual income tax return. So basically, you take $1 or €1 as interest, and you minus at the end of the day the TP, the personal income tax rate. But when you get the equity of €1 or $1, you pay tax 2 times here on the right side. You first pay the corporate tax rate because you know that the dividend is given to you after the company has paid the tax. So it means that you basically get 1 minus TC. But things don't finish here. You also pay the personal income tax. So basically, the slide is giving you a message that as a equity holder, you pay tax 2 times, but as a debt holder, you pay tax only once. Okay. Yeah. So you can see that there is a need to distinguish between. You can see the two TP, but this TP is the personal income tax which you pay when you have the bond income or the debt, the interest income. But TPE is the effective personal tax when you are earning through equity. So we go further and we go to this example. This will be clear when I give you the example. Now, let's see. The situation 1, the income before tax is 1 and the equity income is also 1. So the company is giving you the same amount of debt, interest income and the dividend. Let's say the corporate tax rate is 46%. This interest would be exempted from the tax rate. So there is no tax basically on this interest income, but there would be 46% tax falling on the equity income. So income after corporate tax for the interest remains same. 1 minus 0 is 1. But here, 1 minus 0.46 is 54. So basically, if you earn €1 or $1 as a dividend, after tax, you only get 54. And then we find out that the personal tax rate is 50%. If you earn through interest, but let's imagine that the tax on the equity income is 0, and this is not hypothetical. In several countries, the personal income tax rate on equity income, which is like entrepreneurial income, is basically very low. Whereas the tax rate on the interest earning is more, because interest is comparatively a safer income stream. On safer income stream, the tax man would put more burden on you. On the other hand, the entrepreneurial income dividend is an entrepreneurial income because it's a profit which goes to the, if you read the high school economics book, you will find out that there are 4 factors of production. Land gets rent, the labor gets wages, land, labor, capital gets interest, and the enterprise gets profit. And dividend is a form of profit, by the way. And because to encourage entrepreneurship, in many countries, the dividend income is very much exempted. Now here, the point is very interesting, that why do this happens? That why the entrepreneurial income or the dividend income is tax exempted. Remember that when we were discussing Modigliani and Miller's theorem, and we know that in the Modigliani and Miller theorem, we found out that when we were criticizing Modigliani and Miller theorem, we were bringing into consideration the tax rate. Which tax rate? The corporate tax. The corporate tax is pro debt because the interest income are exempted from it. And just 5 minutes before, when I did this spreadsheet, you must have noticed that actually the tax rate, the interest rate was 10%. But because 40% is a tax rate, we take away 40%, so you effectively pay 6%, not 10%, because 40% of the interest rate is exempted from tax. So the tax, which tax? The corporate tax rate is biased in favor of the debt and against equity. But here comes the line of judgment. Here comes the fairness. But when it comes to the personal income tax, then we find that all the advantage which debt has may be, not always, may be compensated by the personal income tax becoming more favorable to equity rather than debt. Do you get my point? So we have two regimes, two hurdles of taxation. There is no tax burden basically on interest income, but there is a tax burden at the end of the day, which I use the symbol TP, the personal income tax. But when you are earning through equity, you pay TC, the corporate tax rate, but you also pay TPE, the personal income tax on equity. But it could be possible that the overall personal tax, income tax, which the debt holder is paying is more than the sum of the personal income tax and the corporate tax which the equity income is exposed to. And this slide is a classic example. If you see that the corporate tax rate is not falling at all on the interest income, whereas the corporate tax is falling 46% on the equity income. And if you see the income after tax burden, which tax burden? Corporate tax burden. The interest income is more, equity income is less. But here comes the anticlimax, that the personal income tax on the interest income is 50%. It means that out of one, you are only left with 50 cents. But here, just imagine that the personal income tax on equity is zero, nothing. So you get 54. So at the end of the day, after getting grilled by the corporate tax rate and the personal income tax rate, the equity income holder may be having more money than the debt holder. And if you divide 0.50 by 0.54, it's less than 1. If income after all taxes, the ratio of the interest income to the equity income is less than 1, it means that the overall benefit is going to the equity income. The formulation is given here. Yeah, that is called a relative tax advantage. So you can see that the overall advantage is in favor of equity income. So here, the equity income holder is getting 4 cents more than the what you get if you are a debt holder. And by changing these tax rates, so you can see that here, after all taxes, the debt holder gets 50 cents and the equity holder gets 54. So if you divide 50 by 54, you get less than 1. So you can see that there is a more tax advantage to the equity. So here, in a way, we are coming back to Modigliani and Miller. So slightly here, I'm supporting Modigliani and Miller. We criticize, remember, it's very important to notice that we were criticizing Modigliani and Miller that Mr. Professor Merton Miller and Franco Modigliani, you are wrong, because the tax can make the difference, and that can make the debt more attractive. But debt's attractiveness is only through the corporate tax rate. When you bring into discussion the personal income tax rate, it could be more in favor of equity, and that evens out basically. So if the corporate tax rate is pro-debt, the personal income tax could be pro-equity, and that would neutralize, and that may lead us to believe that perhaps Modigliani and Miller were right. So that's how the discussion can be drifted. So that's my idea. So, and you can take more example, and you can see that depending upon the tax rates, it could be possible that one form of financing could be more attractive than the other form of. So I just played with the numbers. And in this example, I did some more calculation. Once again, the interest income and equity income starting point is same. This time I assume that the corporate tax rate is 34. So the interest holder gets 1 minus 0, 1. The equity income holder gets 1 minus 34, 0.34, basically 6 cents. Here we assume that the personal tax on debt is 28%, whereas the equity still remains 0. And we apply this, when we do this calculation, we find that overall, in this case, the debt holder gets 72 cents after all taxes, and the equity holder gets 66 cents. So in this example, the relative tax advantage is to the debt holders than the equity holders. So this relationship between the corporate tax rate and the personal income tax rates can make the one form of financing or one form of financiers better off and the other form of financiers worse off. If you notice in this example, in the last example, the tax rate on equity holders, the personal income tax on equity holder was 0%. In this example, it's still 0%. But at the end of all the taxes, when all the taxes fall, in the previous example, the equity holder was having 4 cents more than the debt holder. But in this example, the debt holder is getting 6 cents more than the equity holders, even though the personal income tax rate on equity is 0% still. But it is because in the previous example, the tax rate on the personal tax rate on debt income was 50%, but now the personal income tax on debt income is 28%. So there is a comparison between, so one form of, so even though there's no tax still on equity income, but because the debt income tax rate has gone down, so that can change. So it will be very interesting to see that how the both. So I would say that the practical experience or the practical approach is that you should consider both personal income tax and the corporate corporate tax rate. Yeah, and that's something else. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to discuss with you. So we have this situation.